Hello everyone and welcome to episode 7 of my Python tutorial series. Today we are going to be learning a new type of variable by creating the successor to our password guessing game. We're going to learn a super cool new concept today, so let's get started right away. So just like always, let's start by making a new file. Before, we've been using two primary types of variables. The first one is a number type, so that would be like num1 equals 34, and that would be a number variable. And then the other one we've done is, let's say, string1 equals, and then in quotation marks we can say hello world. Those are our two types of variables so far. However, there is a third type that is used all the time, and that is an array. So let's do array1 equals, and now what you do for an array is, instead of using quotation marks, instead of typing a number, you're going to use brackets. So to the right of P on the right of your keyboard, you should have a bracket symbol. It is these two. Do not hold shift when you're pressing them. We're not using the squiggly brackets, we're using the normal brackets. Okay, now in these brackets, what an array does is it's not one variable. An array is a list of other variables. So for example, in this array, I can put variable, let's say I want to put the number 10 in it. I put a comma, and then I put the number 20, then put a comma, and I'll put the number 30. Okay, so now I have three variables in one variable. This array is holding three number variables. So let's get rid of our other variables and just start with this array, and let's do some cool stuff with it. Now, right now we have the array. If we try to say print array1, if we put brackets right here, we can specify which number we want to pull out. Now pay attention to this part. When you look at this array, you will see that the first number in here is 10. The second number in here is 20, and the third number in here is 30. So what you might think is that you need to do array1 and grab the first position to grab this number, and the second position to grab the 20, and the third position to grab the 30. That is not the case. In virtually all coding environments, arrays will start at 0. The 0th position holds 10. The first position holds 20. The second position holds the number 30. It is 0, 1, and 2, not 1, 2, and 3. So with that information in mind, if I wanted to print the 10 here, I would type print array 0. And then it would print 10. See that? So now if I wanted to print 20, I would say print the first position, which is 20. Because remember, this is 0, this is 1, and this is 2. So now when I run it, it will print the second one. And then I can swap this number out for 2 and print the third one. This is the basics of how arrays work, and it's super cool. So now we can put some strings instead of numbers. So for example, I could type Pikachu, and I could type Squirtle, and I could type Charmander. Now importantly, take note that each of these arrays have a comma at the end of them. Do not put a comma on the last array or it will break, but make sure you have one on each of the other ones, otherwise it will also break. But anyways, now that we have that, you can see that I can print string out of this array. This is awesome. So you can store numbers or string or other types of variables, which we will get into later. But for now, this is super cool. Okay, so we know how to make an array now. We also know how to print an individual part of the array. However, if we wanted to print all the numbers, and we don't want it to show up like an array, you see how it has the brackets still? Let's try to get rid of these. Let's just print the string, not the entire array. If we wanted to print all the pieces in an array, we have a useful function for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type for, and then I will just name the variable. So we're going to make a new variable, and this will be a piece of the array. I will name it part in array1. Now, this is like a while loop. Remember the while loops where you can say, like, while number is greater than 5? We're basically going to make one of these, but it's just going to cycle through all the pieces in an array. So, up here, we can use the variable we just made, which is part, to print a certain piece of the array. So this code will run once per variable in our array. So for now, let's just try to print all the pieces. I'm going to say print part. Okay, so pay attention to this, because this is probably the most complex thing you've learned so far. What this is going to do is we have made an array, we have 3 variables, and then we make a for loop. Now what this for loop does is the first variable will be assigned to part, and then we are going to print part. And then what's going to happen is the code is going to run again, and it will assign the second variable to part, and then it will print part. And then it will assign the third variable to the variable part, and it will print part. So watch this. See that? So it assigned part to Pikachu, and then printed it, and then assigned part to Squirtle, and then printed it, and it did the same thing with Charmander. So this is a fairly sophisticated concept, but if you understand it, you unlock a whole new level of potential in your code. Alright, so this is how arrays work, and they're incredibly powerful, as I'm sure you can see now. So we are going to move on to our next project with them. The next project we are going to do is to make code that can modify an array while the code is running. Now, if you remember, we were able to add and subtract from numbers, and we were able to set strings and add to strings from before. However, we need to do something a little different to modify arrays and to add to them. So first, let's do a new file, and I will name this one append.py. And here we're going to first make an empty array. So I'm going to call this one inputs equals, and then I will just put some brackets. So completely empty array, there's nothing in it. In fact, if we tried to print it right now, I will try to print inputs. You will see that it just printed some empty brackets. There are no variables stored in this. Now to add one, we're going to use our good old friend, the while true loop. And we're going to say user input. So this is a new variable that I called user input equals input. And then we'll just ask the user to put some text in. So I will say enter text to be added to array. And now I will type inputs. Remember, this is our variable. Now to add, we're not going to do like equals inputs plus user input, right? This is something we've done before, but this is not what we're going to do for this, because we can't add for arrays in that way, at least. That doesn't make sense. Instead, we are going to do inputs dot append, and this append basically just means add the variable to the end of the array. So I'm going to put some parentheses and put the variable we want to put in. And remember, our variable is called user input. So in here, I will type user input. Now, if you see, so far what we have done is create an empty array, and we don't need this anymore. So we create an empty array, and then always we will ask the user to input some text, and then set the variable to their text. We are then going to append that variable into our array. And now let's just try to print it. Print, and then I will type our array. Now when I hit run, it asks, enter a text to be added to the array. I will say screwdriver. And now it says screwdriver right here. Now if I type hammer, it has both of those in the array. See that? And then I can type another one. I will type wood saw. And look at that. All 3 of them are in the array now. So this is how we add to arrays. This is going to be very important for a plethora of projects. But for now, just know that this is the way that you add things to arrays. Alright, now it's time to start our final project for today, which is going to be our unique word game. Okay, so what we're going to do is basically we are going to make an array, and then we are going to ask the player for a word. If the word is not already in the list, and it's the correct length, then you can add it to the array. So the architecture of our code is going to be, we are going to make an array, then we are going to ask the user for a word, and if the word fits our rules that we put in the game, then it will add it to the array, and if not, it will ask the player for a word again or make the player lose. So let's start just with an array. I'm going to say word list equals brackets. Okay, now let's make a while true loop. That way we can have this code running forever. So I will say while true, and then let's ask the player for a word. Now we don't want to add it immediately into the array because we want to check a few things first. So first let's make word added equals input, and then I'll ask for a 5-letter word. You can ask for however many letters you want. I'm going to say enter 5-letter word. Okay, so now we have a variable, and word added will be whatever word people type in. So if I hit play, you'll see that it asks me for a 5-letter word. I can type apple, and it works, and it will repeat again. But now we want to add it to the array only if it is 5 letters long. So now let's add an if statement. Remember, we've learned about these before. If the length, so len is a new function that we haven't used before. Whatever we put in here, it will just output the length of the string of the number. So I can put word added, and now it will put the length of the word. So if it's 5 letters, it'll output 5. If it's 3 letters, it'll output 3. And if the length of the word is equal to 5, then let's add it to the list. So remember, we do word list dot append, and then in here, let's say word added. So remember, this is our list. This is our variable that we just made. And then if the word is exactly 5 letters long, then we will append it to the list. And now we need a way to check if this code is working. So let's just say print word list. Now if I run this, it says enter a 5-letter word. I can type Franck, and then I can type, and then see it says that it's in the list, and then I can say germs, and it adds it to the list, and I can add maple, and it adds the word maple. You see that? So it's just adding to the array. And if I type an incorrect word, if I type bug, it doesn't work. See that? It didn't get added to the array. If I type a really long word like potato chips, it also doesn't work. It has to be 5 letters to work. So for now, we have this if statement that if it is 5 letters long, then it will be added to the list. But now let's make it to where if it's not 5 letters long, it will tell the player. So I will say else, and then I will just print this word is not 5 letters long. But let's say I type the word green, and then I type a whole bunch of new words, and then I type green again. Then you lose. That's the goal of this game, so we can make a fun pass and play game. So we need to check if the word is already in the word list. And in fact, we have an if function just for that. So I'm going to put the else statement down here, and then I'm going to move this here. And just for now, let's move this down. And what I want to do is make it to where if the word is exactly 5 letters, we are only going to add it if it is also not in the list. Now let's say if the word added, and this is going to be super simple, watch this. I'm going to say is not in word list. So all this does is it checks if the word that we typed in is not in the array that we made. It's super simple and very cool that we can type it this simply. Now down here, if it's not in the list, then we want to add the word to the list. So I'm just going to put this code in, and remember to tab in your code. And now what this says, if the word is exactly 5 letters long, and the word is not in our array we made, then add it to the array, and then print the word list. So this should work. Let's try it. So if I run the code, and if I type the word discs, and then let's add some other random words, apple, pears, and then if I type the word discs again, then it doesn't add it to the array. But our goal is to make it to where when you guess a word that's already been guessed before, it restarts the game, you lose. So now we got to figure out how to code that. And it's actually not too hard. So currently, if the word is exactly 5 letters, and it is not in the word list, then it will add it to the word list. But if it is in the list, let's print that word has already been added. Game over. So now it will say that the game's over, and to make the game actually reset, let's say word list equals brackets. So now we've completely cleaned out the word list. There are no more words in it. So that way the game can restart. So watch this. If I do this, and I type the word cater, and then I type the word chain, and then I type the word rings, and then I type the word chain again, so this is my second time adding chain to the list, it'll say, that word has already been added, game over. But now watch, see how we added this here? This clears out the array, so now there's nothing in the array, so now I can actually add the word chain again. See that? Now it's the only thing on the array. Now I can type a whole bunch of other words again, and it keeps working. And then if I type a repeat word, the game is over and it restarts again. So this is actually working very closely to what we want it to, but there are a few issues. For example, if I run this, and I type the word apple, and then I give this to my friend and say, hey, now it's your turn to type a word. He can see that I just typed apple. There's no challenge. He knows the words I typed. We need to fix that. So instead, what we're going to do is we are going to, first of all, not print the word list here. Instead, let's make it to where the word list is printed when the game is over, so you can see all the words that were added. And now if we run it, we'll see that if I type a word, it doesn't say the list anymore. See? So no list. However, there's still an issue, and it's quite glaring. And that is that you can still see the word I typed in. We need to get rid of that somehow. And the way we're going to do that is basically just enter a whole bunch of enters until it gets all the way down to the bottom and hides the top. So watch this. So first, let's print, and then in here, I'm going to type, in quotation marks, pay attention. Usually above your enter key is where this button is. It is the backslash, not the forward slash, the backslash. And then do an N. And backslash N in almost every coding language is new line. So that will be an enter. So watch, when I run this code and I type a word, it put a little bit of extra space here. See that? But now we want a lot of space, not just one line. We want to clear the entire board. So watch this. I could just take this and do a whole bunch of new lines like this and then have a whole bunch of space when I add a word. See that? However, that would take forever and that would be stupid and boring. So instead, we're going to do it more efficiently. We're just going to have one new line print, but in this new line print, after the quotation mark, I'm going to add the times symbol, so Shift 8, and then I'm just going to add 36 lines. You can add as many as you want. If you do 10, it'll add 10 new lines. If you do 40, it'll add 40 new lines. Don't add too many though, because otherwise the Python idle will squeeze it, and then it'll just look like one new line. But for now, let's try 36. Now if I run it, it says enter a 5-letter word. Let me enter one. Do you see how it moved it 36 lines? That's a lot of lines, but it's still just barely not enough. So let's add a few more. I'm going to make this 40, and let's see how that looks. Now if I type pairs, look at that. It clears out the entire thing. The next player that plays does not see the word that was entered previously. Okay, now we have that, and our code is actually almost completely done. Let's just add a few extra things to make the game feel a little smoother. So for example, once we're done doing all the new lines, let's just say print word added successfully. Just so the player knows that their word was entered. And then I think it would be cool if we printed how many words have been added in total. So what we're going to do is we're going to say print. And then in here, you're going to recognize this because we've used the length already up here. We can print the length of the array, basically say how many words have been added into this list. So I'm going to say length of word list. So now it will print the length of the word list. However, if we try this code right now, it's not going to work. And remember, we've learned why when we did our GUI. And that is because we're asking it to print a number, and it needs a string. So we are going to stringify it by typing str and then putting some parentheses around this. So now we've turned this number into a string. And then let's just add some text. So I'm going to type plus, and then I'll type words added so far. And now if I run the code, it says enter a 5-letter word. I'll type the word drive. Now it will tell me word added successfully. There is one word so far. And then it asks me to enter another 5-letter word. So now I can pass this game to somebody else and they can type a word, and then we can pass it back to me, and then I can type a word. It'll keep going until somebody loses. Every time I add a word, it'll say 3 words added so far. So everything's working perfectly. Now you might need to finish with the new line length, depending on the size of your screen, but this should generally work for most. But that aside, we are done. This is all of our code. So hopefully you had a lot of fun learning one of our more advanced projects and learning the concept of arrays. Next time we are going to be using arrays even more. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and I will see you next episode.